a series on Strive for Truth, which is the name given to the English translation of Michtav Eliyahu, the letter from Eliyahu, which contains many of the talks of Rav Dessler. And Rav Dessler was very inspiring, a deep and wide expert on what we call Pnimius HaTorah, the inner aspects of Torah, from every angle. From all the Midrashim, all the statements of the Gemara. And he was a great master in trying to explain the deeper concepts in terms that we can understand. So today I'm beginning here with the Michtav Eliyahu, page 174, the fifth volume. And the question with which he deals with is, if you look at the bottom of the page, Motzi Yaakov Mizolel, how we find a procedure in many descriptions of what happened, especially to produce the leaders of the people of Israel, which is bringing about very high levels from very low levels. And we start here with the example he quotes, bottom of the page, Lama Sibchu min hashamayim shasig Yaakov et habrachot derech orma dafka. We know that the foundation of the people of Israel is Yaakov. And the struggle with Yaakov and Esav, referred to in the passages in Bereshis, is the seeds on a deeper level of the struggle between the people of Israel, because his name was turned to Israel, which means that God rules, against those nations who hate us. Or amongst them, there are still people today who hate us, with irrational hatred. And, well, there's a description of it being already a form of a struggle in the womb of Rivka. And then, when they grew up, the one who was born first was Esav. So Yaakov, surely making use of a weak moment, he purchased the birthright. You know, today also it's interesting that the name birthright has gained educational significance, and that one of the strongest movements to allow Jews, let's say, who've become absorbed in the culture of Edom and Esav and Yavan, become assimilated and intermarried, that there's a program, at least their birthright is, to come and visit Israel and find out what the word Israel means. That's what lies behind it. That's the birthright. And we say, Jews have a birthright, which was taken from Esav. But it's clear that as far as gaining the blessings, which really belong to the one who was the firstborn, Esav, he acted with deceit to receive those blessings. So, as it says here on the last line, if you've got everyone's got the Hebrew in front of you, says, as Rashi explains, Yaakov wanted to purchase the Bechorah. And what does the birthright really mean? And what does it mean in the whole Chumash? It means the one who is born first is the one who makes a man into a father. So really he's the one who, to a certain extent, brings the concept of fatherhood into life. The fatherhood of God. So Hashem said, B'ni B'chori Yisrael. The people of Israel are my firstborn, meaning they're the ones who are here to declare that God is the father of mankind, of the family of nations. And so Rashi says, Yaakov wanted the Bechorah because that's the concept of divine service, is connected with this. Nevertheless, why was it achieved through deceit? And similarly, we have another passage in the book of Genesis where we're told about how was Peretz produced. Peretz was one of twins, Zerach and Peretz, and Peretz jumped out first from the womb, and Peretz is mentioned as the child of Yehuda, but how was that child produced? With very questionable sources. I mean, Yehuda, according to, if you look at it simply, he had relationships with the harlot. It turned out that harlot was the daughter of Malki Tzedek Melech Shem, Bu Kohen Le'el Elyon. At that time, we know there was the yeshiva of Shem and Eva in Yerushalayim, where they preserved the Noachide code. And Malki Tzedek, obviously that was Shem himself, obviously descendant of Shem, that he there taught the Torah of the Noachide code, which was always given to Noach. He preserved it, but didn't do outreach. Anyone wanted to find out could come there. Nevertheless, he preserved it. And his daughter was Tamar. So therefore, when there was a question, the Tamar became pregnant, so Yehuda admitted that he had fathered this pregnancy. And what happened with Peretz? We know later on, Peretz became the forefather of Boaz, and ultimately the ancestor of David HaMelech and the Mashiach. And right in the middle of the difficult to understand story of the argument between the brothers and Yosef, it's also not an easy matter to understand in its own terms. It also is explained as the seeds of what might happen afterwards, which actually did happen, of a split between the leadership of Yosef of the tribes and the leadership of Yehuda of the tribes. So this is already indicated in this passage. Squeezed inside the story concerning what happened to Yosef and his brothers is brought the story of the origin of the Mashiach, Ben David. So it's also difficult to understand. Even with it, another aspect, which we go back a little bit in Bereshis, is the birth of Ammon and Moab from incest. With that incestuous birth, fathered by Lot, who committed incest with his two daughters, that was produced Moab. What's Moab? Me'av. It's a child who was born through incestuous relationship with father and his daughter, Me'av. And from that was developed the nation of Moab, and the princess of Moab turned out to be Ruth in the end. So she came also. Ruth was the descendant of the relationship with Lot and his daughter. That produced Ruth, who was the ancestress of David HaMelech. We find something similar later on with the sin of David with Bathsheba. And the prophet did not in any way limit his strong accusation of David HaMelech for what he did with Bathsheba. But who was born from that? Shlomo HaMelech, the son of David HaMelech, who built the temple. And also Rechavam, and another son of David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech. What happened to Rechavam? He was the son of Naamah the Ammonite, from the other daughter of Lot. So this is the concept of Hotzi Yakar Mizoler. Kepiti, it says, the one who brings out something very precious from the lowest level, the most immoral level, the most ugly level, but from that you can bring out the most precious. So where the sages learn something else from this same pasuk. They say, if a person teaches Torah to Ben Hamaretz, to an ignorant man who knows nothing, you take a Jew who had no knowledge at all, something not of Torah and of Derech Eretz, and you teach him, and you bring him to a high level, that's the highest achievement. To bring out the divine spark which is hidden, and you can bring to the highest level. So he says, this is also the concept referred to in more allegorical midrashic aspects in the Zohar. It's called to give shochat to Satan, to give a bribery to Satan. What's it mean? There are powers of evil in the world and the powers of virtue in the world. And we have to understand this together with the statement, who are Satan? Who is Satan? Satan means you're an obstacle. It means obstacles that are created in the world to stop people thinking they can reach saintliness without participating in an obstacle race. An obstacle race is exciting, but it's a bit dangerous. And also it requires a lot of effort. I happen to know, I think we give this a good mashal, a good parable, that when soldiers are trained to be able to face critical circumstances, they have to do a lot of exercises they're not used to in ordinary life. So all soldiers in every army in the world, they're put through training courses to know how to get into battle. Not everybody can do it. If they fail in it, they say, well, we can't We can't put you into fighting situation. We may have to give you just a job in the office of the army. They're capable of something else. But those who are given the difficult tasks, they have to go not through ordinary training. They have what's it called in America? And if you know?
Training.
Pardon?
Basic training?
Combat.
No, there's more than basic training.
Special force, special training?
Yes.
Special forces.
There's a special course where they're given very difficult obstacles. Normally they're only taking people up to a certain age.
Ranger school, I think it's called.
It's called Ranger's course. And the Ranger's course is very stiff. Generally speaking, they don't allow people above a certain age to participate. I happen to know somebody quite well who was a bit over age, but he's a very keen sportsman. And constantly did dieting and exercises and parachute jumping and other things. So they accepted him also into the Ranger's course, which is very difficult. Got to overcome so many obstacles. So we can say, how can we understand the race of life from the cradle to the grave? Similar circumstances. So Hashem does as follows. It's also the same principle of survival of the fittest comes into play here. It said by Yaakov Sarita, he had to struggle. This nation, at least some of them, will have to struggle with the Tzaro Shel Esav. And sometimes he will look like a hijacker, it says. And sometimes a malach looks like, an armed burglar. You've got to struggle with him. And he's very strong. So you've got to fight him. And that's inherent in the change of name of Yaakov, who holds on the heel of Esav. You want to reign at the heel of Esav, to be his slave, or at least constantly be influenced by him, whether he's embracing you in love or whether he's fighting against you, you just want to give in, then your name will remain Yaakov, at the heel of the other nations. If, however, you're willing to struggle, so Tzarita, there's a struggle, but in the end you'll be victorious. So it says, if we understand the Satan is the Yetzer Hara, and Hashem gives every person tests in life, Nisyonot, we're all given tests. And sometimes we go through life like a zombie. In other words, we take it easy, we think thereby we're living. Well, you're not really living, you're just accepting everything passively and not acting out your potential. So you go through life dreaming and not achieving a higher level. Where does freedom of choice come in? When you go and allow the inner potential that Hashem has given you and use it for the good instead of the bad. And yet Hashem gives every person tests, different levels. The question is, how do you overcome this power of evil? The power of evil from outside as well as the power of evil from inside. So you sometimes have to use tactics. But after all, each person has an understanding of his own character as having weak points, wherein he finds it very difficult to overcome his self-centered pride and his search just for external pleasure. So what's Hashem do? In order that the revelation of the power of good over evil can become open and can be developed, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he hides, to some extent, the power of evil. In other words, רק כשיש הסתר, יש מקום שיכול לה בגילוי הבא על דמאס האדם. Only where there's a hiddenness of Hashem. The hiddenness of the power of virtue. Then on that can come the ultimate revelation through the actions of man. So if Yitzchak would have given Yaakov the full blessing without any mistake, then it would have been like the tefillah of Rabbi Chia and his sons, described in the Gemara in Bava Metzia, and then the revelation of the power of Hashem and of virtue would have become so strong, there would be no place left to human beings to increase to a high level. And it would mean bringing the Mashiach and the redemptive period before its time. Mashiach, the redemptive period means, in the words of the prophets, there's no war left, there's no destructive powers any more being used by human beings. They won't anymore learn the lessons of warfare, which means also economical warfare will cease, and people work together to provide plenty for everyone. And they'll give up their sword, they'll give up every aspect of destruction. That's the time of the Mashiach. But if you're not ready for it, then it's too early to bring that age. So, in order to understand this, I must bring you the remarkable description of Rabbi Chia. Now, here I want to put in something personal to do with our yeshiva. It's well known that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the compiler of the Mishnah, was an enormously great personality. He was also the descendant of David HaMelech. He was the president of the Sanhedrin. And he managed to create in his time, through his saintly personality, despite his wealth, so he made a very close friendship with one who is described, at least, as one of the emperors of Rome. Some say it wasn't really the main emperor. From our source it appears he was. It was the emperor of Rome. And they had great friendship. And in fact, even it's mentioned when Rivka wanted to find out what's going on in her womb, so she went to Beit Shem Ve'eva, Lidrosh Hashem, to find out. So she was told, you know, you've got two opposing twins. One is the opposite of the other. It sometimes happens. I've even seen it happen amongst my grandchildren, some of them are twins. So some of them, the twins, are more or less identical. And for many years, until they grow older, you can hardly see a difference between them. And then we've got other twins. One is the opposite of the other, completely different. It's got to do with genetics, you know. So, anyway, these two twins were different, very different. To understand it more deeply, the same expressions used for the character of Esav also used for the character of David HaMelech. In other words, there's one is more not so very active, not arrogant. The other one is, today we would say, he's hyperactive child. So you find some twins, one is hyperactive and the other one is laid back. Yeah, a laid back child.
Asha.
Huh? So there are two types of twins. So David HaMelech used his great energy in the service of Hashem. And Yitzchak thought also, Esav can also use great energy. He'll use it as part of Am Yisrael, and he will, after all the political and military aspects of establishing the Torah state in the land of Israel. But of course, Rivka knew a little bit more about deceit, and she saw the point of deceit also involved in the character of Esau. But now, so I want to go back now to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he was established this friendship. So he said there is a way where sometimes you might get great friendship and work together with the Roman Empire in a good way. And he did. He achieved in his time. He became also the political leader. He was always very close to Antoninus and had many debates. And he took out, you can see, one of the best levels of Roman-Greek civilization, how that can also be pervaded and joined together with Am Yisrael. It was a very great time, the period when he was there. Now, who did he choose as his successor? His major disciple was somebody called Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia is also known, he's the compiler of the Tosefta, mentioned in the Gemara. He was his very, very great scholar. He's probably the biggest scholar amongst his disciples. But he didn't choose Rabbi Chia. Why? Rabbi Chia decided that he's going to spend all his power to teach the Amei Haaretz. He introduced a cheder system which didn't exist before. He did all himself. He cultivated deer in order to take their skin as parchment, and then on the parchment he wrote out the Torah, he himself, and then he gave the children copies of the Torah, and he taught the children to teach one another, and he built up all through Eretz Israel chadarim to teach children Torah, the Amei Haaretz. Although he was one of the greatest scholars, and that Rabbi Yehuda said, really he should be my successor. But he says this is more important, because he's going out to those who don't know, and putting all his power into it, that those who don't know, they all of them have the potential to become Talmidei Chachamim. So he was the one who saved the Torah of his time. Because if they were going to neglect the ordinary people, they wouldn't be affected by the teaching of Yehuda Nasi. They wouldn't even know how to learn the Mishnah, which he compiled. What's the point? He compiled the Mishnah. The only people who can study it are the big Talmidei Chachamim, and the others not. Says what he is doing is far greater. And when we started our yeshiva, so my partner, Rav Carmel, the disciple of Rav Dessler, he said, we should call it the yeshiva of Rav Chia. For the purpose of our yeshiva, whereas previously yeshiva as a whole, they were geared to help those who, let's say, yeshiva for let's say, for students, end of the teens, beginning of the 20s. They would only take in students, on the whole, if they'd had a background. Or take a student doesn't know anything. So occasionally if it's somebody very brilliant, so you find in the history of the yeshiva world, they took them in. But people weren't so brilliant, they couldn't really fit in. It would take them years and years. They were the same level as the others. They wouldn't take them in. So we want to make yeshiva an open yeshiva to which everybody can come, no matter what his background is. The concept of opening up the yeshiva to those who are not yet religious, not yet knowing the Aleph from a bet. That's it. That's where we start with the Mupan as well. Got an Aleph from a bet, part of it. That was Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia's Zechut B'Shamayim is very, very great. So now the Gemara, this is very fascinating Gemara. But before It's only Feb. Yes.
You can see.
Yes, yeah. So I must give a. I'll have to leave the story till tomorrow because it's quite fascinating. It's connected with this whole subject, but I want to leave the last minutes for questions. Any questions?
Yes, I'll ask a question. It's a great moral question. You use the term deceit. To what extent can a person use lies, deceit, dishonesty, impersonation, whatever it happens to be, to what, in one man's opinion, is a laudable goal?
Is it what?
A laudable goal, a great achievement. I want to do this, although it's not quite ethical, I want to achieve this. Because I think it's proper and better, in one man's opinion. To what extent, where do you draw the line?
That is, from an ethical point of view, a very difficult question. And this is why all our ethics, where you can look at it from opposite angles, you could say, in certain instances, the end justifies the means. In other instances, we say no. If the means are not completely ethical, even though the end is ethical, it's not permissible. And even the translation of most commentators on the phrase tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, you've got to pursue righteousness, righteousness. What's the significance of the double phrase? That if you want to achieve righteousness, you can only do it by righteous means.
Okay.
So normally speaking, we say the end in Torah does not justify the means.
Correct.
But there are circumstances where it's permissible. But how do we know? So we follow, this is all part of what we spoke about a few times during Hanukkah, the concept of Laviram mechukei rutzonecha, to take the people of Israel away from the chukim. The chukim are those aspects of the mitzvot, and those mitzvot that we can't really decide with our human intellect. And therefore we need guidance from above, from Hashem. Hashem has told us chukim. Even many laws which have to do with righteousness and justice, but there are certain aspects which are grey aspects, and even in most moral systems and legal systems, there are different interpretations. In which circumstances, let's say, in order so then nearly all would agree that if a person is under the threat of being killed unless he tells a lie, then we say in Torah, pikuach nefesh, it's straightforward. We're not talking about religious persecution, but where there's a situation, the only way he can save his life is by telling a lie, that it would be permissible, and which would be accepted in most courts, and also accepted according to the law of the Torah, unless there's a religious persecution. But just a person who's in danger of losing his life, and we consider it a sin for a person to either kill himself, even allow himself to be killed for no reason. It's got to defend, just like it's permissible a person to wound his attacker. Wounding another person is a sin, but what if the other person, you don't have weapons, and he's got a weapon, then the Torah says, although there are some pacifists who say no, more or less Gandhi in some of his statements sounds as though he felt that he should not, if there's any violence against you, don't go and protect yourself through violence. But this is not the way. This is also an extreme point of view hinted at in some Christian texts, but in practice it's not followed. And the Torah also says someone wants to kill you, so you can, if you're strong enough by not wounding him, just by fighting him, you've learned karate or whatever, and you can knock him down without actually crippling him, fine, but if not, you can cripple him. And if that's not good enough, you can kill him to protect yourself. So this is, it's similar to that. What happens if you can protect yourself by telling him a lie? So it's similarly. If that's a question of life and death, you can tell him a lie. There's a whole question raised. Let's say you're in a Nazi environment and you don't look Jewish. And then they ask you, are you Jewish? Are you allowed to deny it? So some would say, if it's a religious persecution, there's a bit of debatable point, but on the whole, in practice, most of the authors of halakha said, you can hide the fact that you're a Jew. And many people did so. The question is whether you can go and, as it were, put on the uniform of a Nazi and so on. That's already more of a problem. In each case you've got to consider the pros and cons. So the same applies to use of deceit. So this of course raises the question, what right did Rivka have to impose upon Yaakov, who didn't want to do it, but she said, I've got prophecy, that's what you've got to do. And he recognized her as in fact, she knew about the message she'd received from before birth. So therefore, he recognized that it's got from his mother. She said, any curse will come from this, put it on me. So he did it. And he acted in deceit in order to protect himself from Esau. So that's basically mentioned also, like David HaMelech, when he praises God in his great song, when he overcame his enemies. So he also said, in Tamim Titamam, a person, you Hashem, you act the same way. In Vikesh Titapal, if a person is straightforward, you're straightforward with him. And what happens if a person is a tricker? You'll trick him. God will also do the same thing, that the person who thinks through tricks, he can go and manipulate other human beings, and then he'll be tricked. The one who digs the pit for the others, he'll fall into the pit that he was digging. And Hashem directs that. He's digging a pit for himself. So this is the way of the Torah, gives us directions. A lot of these directions have also been followed by the civilized world, because they take a lot of notice, on the whole. The Western civilization, in its better aspects, is based a great deal upon biblical sources. So they also take note of this. Okay, so more questions, Yitzhak Hashem, tomorrow before the Shir, and also at the end of the Shir. It's easiest that way.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
And you want to keep these pages because
The answer is yes.